Haarlem, the Netherlands. Year 1943. The park was quiet. Too quiet for a country at war. Trees stood still in the cold air, and a wooden bench sat beneath their shadow. On that bench, a woman waited. She was alone, watching people pass by, pretending to be just another citizen enjoying a normal day. A teenage girl walked toward her. She looked harmless. Braided pigtails. Thin arms. A simple dress. No one would have noticed her. No one would have suspected her. The girl stopped in front of the bench and smiled. "What is your name?" she asked politely. The woman answered. In that moment, everything changed. The girl reached into her coat. She pulled out a pistol. She looked the woman straight in the eyes. And she pulled the trigger. The woman collapsed on the bench, dead before she hit the ground. The girl did not scream. She did not run. She calmly turned around, walked to her bicycle, and rode away as if nothing had happened. Her name was Freddy Oversteegen. She was 16 years old. The woman she killed was not a random stranger. She was a Dutch collaborator, a citizen who had chosen to work with the Nazis. She carried a list in her possession. A list filled with names and addresses of Jewish families living in the region. That list was meant for the Nazis. If it had reached them, hundreds of men, women, and children would have been arrested, deported, and murdered. Entire families would have disappeared. By pulling that trigger, Freddy Oversteegen saved them all. By the end of World War II, Freddy and her older sister would assassinate dozens of Nazi soldiers and collaborators. The exact number was never recorded. When people later asked Freddy how many she had killed, she always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier such questions. This is not a story about superheroes. There is no dramatic music. No perfect ending. This is the story of two teenage girls who learned to kill while trying to remain human. Girls who flirted with Nazi officers, led them into forests, and shot them dead. Girls who trained underground in a potato shed. Girls who refused to murder children, even when ordered to do so. Girls who fought monsters without becoming monsters themselves. Freddy Oversteegen was born in 1925, in a small village just outside Haarlem. Her childhood was not normal. It was never meant to be. Her family lived on a houseboat, floating quietly on the water. Her father struggled to earn money. Life was difficult, even before the war came. Her mother, Truus, known to everyone as Trine, was a committed communist. She believed in one simple idea. When you see injustice, you do not look away. You act. When Freddy was still young, her parents divorced. One day, her father stood at the front of the boat, singing a French farewell song as they drifted away. Freddy watched him disappear from her life. She would rarely see him again. Trine moved Freddy and her older sister, Truus, into a tiny apartment in Haarlem. The apartment had almost nothing. The girls slept on mattresses stuffed with straw. The rooms were cold. Food was scarce. But there was always space for others. Jewish refugees fleeing Germany. Political opponents hunted by the Nazis. Strangers who needed a place to hide. Freddy and Truus grew up sharing their beds with people whose names they sometimes did not even know. Their home was never safe, but it was always open. Their mother taught them something early in life. Some things matter more than comfort. Some things matter more than safety. If you have to help someone, she told them, you must be willing to sacrifice yourself. That lesson shaped their lives. On May 10, 1940, Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. The Dutch army resisted for 5 days. Then they surrendered. Freddy was 14 years old. Truus was 16. The occupation began immediately. German soldiers flooded the streets. Nazi flags hung from buildings. New rules appeared overnight. Fear became part of daily life. Freddy would later remember the sounds. German soldiers banging on doors with the butts of their rifles. The noise echoed through entire neighborhoods. The shouting. The screaming. People were dragged from their homes. Families were torn apart. It was terrifying. But the Oversteegen family did not hide. They resisted. Freddy and Truus joined their mother in distributing illegal newspapers and anti-Nazi pamphlets. At night, they moved quietly through the streets with glue and paper. They covered German propaganda posters with messages of resistance. The Netherlands must be free. Do not go to Germany. For every Dutch man working in Germany, a German soldier goes to the front. After pasting the posters, they jumped on their bicycles and raced away, hearts pounding. If they were caught, they would be executed. But they were never caught. Two young girls on bicycles did not look dangerous. No one suspected them. In 1941, a man knocked on their door. His name was Frans van der Wiel. He was a commander in the Haarlem Council of Resistance, part of the underground network fighting the Nazi occupation. He had heard stories about the Oversteegen family. A mother hiding refugees. Two daughters spreading illegal material. He wanted to recruit them. He looked at Trine and asked a simple question. Can your daughters join the resistance? Freddy was 14. Truus was 16. Their mother did not hesitate. She said yes. The girls said yes. But van der Wiel was not convinced. He needed to know if they could be trusted. If they would break under pressure. So he tested them. A few days later, he returned to their apartment dressed as a Gestapo officer. He burst through the door, shouting in German, waving a gun. He demanded to know where a Jewish man was hiding. Freddy and Truus believed it was real. They did not speak. They did not give up a single name. Instead, they attacked him. They kicked him. They hit him. They fought back with everything they had. They were ready to die rather than betray someone else. That was when van der Wiel stopped. He revealed who he really was. They had passed the test. Then he told them the truth about what joining the resistance meant. You will learn to sabotage bridges and railway lines, he said. Then he paused. And you will learn to shoot Nazis. Truus looked at her younger sister. Freddy smiled. Well, she said, that is something I have never done before. Before they left, their mother gave them one final piece of advice. Always stay human. The resistance did not train its fighters in open fields or military bases. It trained them in silence. Freddy and Truus were taken to a hidden place beneath the ground. It was an underground potato shed, dark, damp, and cold. The smell of earth filled the air. This was where they would learn to become soldiers. Here, no one shouted commands. No flags waved. No uniforms were worn. Only quiet voices and hard lessons. They were taught how to hold a weapon. How to breathe. How to aim. How to keep their hands steady even when fear tried to take control. They learned how to fire a gun. And they learned what it meant to kill. No one told them it would be easy. No one told them it would feel right. They were told only one thing. If they failed, people would die. Their first mission was not an assassination. It was arson. The resistance needed to destroy Nazi supply warehouses. These buildings stored food, fuel, and equipment meant for German troops. Burning them would slow the occupation. But the warehouses were guarded by SS soldiers. Men with guns. Men trained to kill. The plan was simple, and dangerous. Freddy and Truus would approach the guards openly. They would smile. They would talk. They would flirt. They would distract the soldiers while other resistance members slipped in unseen and set the fires. Two teenage girls walking up to Nazi guards should have been suspicious. But it was not. The soldiers laughed. They relaxed. They enjoyed the attention. They never imagined the danger standing in front of them. While the guards were distracted, the warehouses were set on fire. Flames rose into the night sky. The mission was a complete success. When the guards finally realized something was wrong, it was already too late. Van der Wiel saw the truth clearly. These girls could go places that men could not. They could get close to targets no one else could reach. Their youth was a weapon. Their innocence was a disguise. Now, it was time to use it fully. Freddy's first assassination was not a German soldier. It was a Dutch woman. The resistance had received urgent intelligence. A collaborator was preparing to hand over a list to the Nazis. A list filled with names and addresses of Jewish families. If that list reached German hands, hundreds would die. There was no time to arrest her. There was no court. There was no alternative. The assignment was given to Freddy. She rode her bicycle through the city, her heart pounding, her pistol hidden beneath her coat. She reached a public park and saw the woman sitting alone on a bench. Freddy approached calmly. She asked one simple question. "What is your name?" The woman answered. Freddy knew she had the right target. She pulled out her pistol. She looked the woman in the eyes. And she pulled the trigger. Later, Freddy would describe the moment in words that stayed with her forever. "The first thing you want to do after you shoot someone," she said, "is to pick them up. To help them." That instinct never left her. Not after the first kill. Not after the last. As the war continued, Freddy and Truus developed their own methods. They learned what worked. They learned what kept them alive. One method became especially effective. The forest. German officers often gathered in bars and taverns. They drank. They laughed. They felt safe. One of the sisters would walk in alone. She would sit near an officer. She would smile at him. Laugh at his jokes. Touch his arm casually. Then she would ask the question. "Would you like to take a walk in the woods?" The answer was always yes. They would walk together, deeper and deeper into the forest. Away from roads. Away from witnesses. Hidden among the trees, the other sister waited. One shot. One body falling to the ground. The officer would be buried in a hole already prepared. Then the girls would leave on their bicycles, disappearing into the night. Other times, speed was their weapon. Truus would ride the bicycle. Freddy sat on the back, pistol ready. They would spot their target walking down the street. They rode past him. Freddy fired. They kept riding. Just two girls on a bicycle. Nothing unusual. "We always used bicycles," Truus would later explain. "Walking was too dangerous. I always made sure the way was clear." It worked. Sometimes they followed a target home. Learned his routine. Learned when he was alone. They knocked on his door. When he opened it, he saw a young girl. Innocent. Harmless. By the time he understood the danger, it was over. In 1943, a third fighter joined their resistance cell. Her name was Hannie Schaft. Everyone called her Hannie. She was different from Freddy and Truus. She came from a middle-class family. Her father was a teacher. She studied law at the University of Amsterdam. She wanted to become a human rights lawyer. Then the Nazis demanded all students sign a loyalty pledge to Germany. Hannie refused. She was expelled. She did not go home. She joined the resistance. Hannie had a face people remembered. Bright red hair. Pale skin. Green eyes. It would later make her famous. And it would eventually get her killed. Van der Wiel tested her the same way he had tested the Oversteegen sisters. He gave her a gun and sent her to assassinate a Nazi officer. Her hands were shaking as she raised the weapon. She pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. The officer revealed himself as WWII. It had been a test. She passed. The three young women became a lethal unit. Hannie was the thinker. The planner. She considered every detail. Truus was the leader. Decisive. Fearless. Ready to make impossible choices. Freddy was the scout. She memorized streets, escape routes, and safe houses. Together, they were deadly. But killing was not their only mission. They blew up railway lines to stop deportation trains. They smuggled Jewish children to safety. They forged identity papers. They gathered intelligence for Allied forces. And they killed German soldiers, Nazi officers, Dutch collaborators. The collaborators were often the worst. They were like cancer, Truus later said. You had to cut them out. One day, an order came from resistance leadership. The target was Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Nazi ruler of the Netherlands. The plan was unthinkable. Kidnap his children. Use them as leverage. If he refused to cooperate, kill them. Freddy, Truus, and Hannie refused. We are not Hitlerites, Freddy said. Resistance fighters do not murder children. They had killed many people. They would kill again. But never children. That was the line. By the later years of the war, the streets of the Netherlands had changed. Fear was no longer hidden. It lived in open daylight. German patrols were everywhere. Dutch collaborators walked proudly beside Nazi soldiers. Neighbors watched neighbors. A wrong word could mean arrest. A wrong look could mean death. Freddy, Truus, and Hannie kept fighting. They moved constantly. New hiding places. New routes. New faces. Every mission carried the risk of capture, torture, and execution. Still, they continued. The collaborators became their main targets. These were not foreign soldiers. These were Dutch men and women who betrayed their own people. People who sold information for money or power. People who handed Jewish families to the Gestapo. We could not arrest them, Truus later explained. There were no courts. No prisons. There was only one solution. They acted like surgeons, cutting away what they believed was destroying their society. One afternoon, Truus was cycling through the city when she witnessed something that would stay with her forever. A Dutch SS soldier stood in the street. He was holding an infant. The baby's father was there. The baby's sister was there. They were screaming, begging, crying. The soldier lifted the child. And smashed the baby against a wall. The child died instantly. Truus stopped her bicycle. She did not wait for orders. She did not call for backup. She pulled out her pistol and shot the soldier dead in the middle of the street. Later, she said quietly, that was not a mission. But I do not regret it. Some things do not need orders. Even in war, there were moments that demanded action without permission. As 1944 approached, Hannie Schaft became one of the most wanted resistance fighters in the Netherlands. Her red hair had been seen too often. Witnesses described her face. Her name began to circulate. The Nazis issued a notice. Find the girl with the red hair. Hannie dyed her hair black. She wore glasses. She changed her appearance as much as possible. But she did not stop fighting. In June 1944, Hannie and a fellow resistance fighter, Jan Boonkamp, were sent to assassinate a Dutch collaborator named Willem Raggett. They found their target. Boonkamp fired first. Raggett did not die immediately. In the chaos that followed, Boonkamp was shot in the stomach. Hannie escaped. Boonkamp was captured alive. He was taken to a hospital, badly wounded, dying. The Nazis interrogated him. He refused to talk. Then they tried something different. A Gestapo officer pretended to be a resistance member. He spoke softly. He said he was a friend. He said he wanted to help. Bohnkamp, delirious from pain, blood loss, and medication, believed him. He gave up Hannie's address. Shortly after, he died. The Nazis moved quickly. They raided Hannie's parents' home. They arrested her mother and father. They sent them to a concentration camp. Hannie disappeared into hiding. She knew the truth. If she was captured, everyone connected to her would die. For months, she stayed underground. The war was turning. Allied forces were advancing. Liberation felt close. But hiding forever was impossible. March 21, 1945. The end of the war was only weeks away. Hannie was cycling through Harlem, carrying illegal newspapers and a pistol. She was stopped at a Nazi checkpoint. They searched her. They found everything. She was arrested. Hannie was taken to a prison in Amsterdam. For weeks, she was interrogated. She was beaten. She was tortured. She was kept in solitary confinement. The Nazis suspected they had captured someone important. But they needed confirmation. Then they noticed something. Her hair was black. But at the roots, it was growing back red. They had found her. The girl with the red hair. Hannie confessed to her actions. She admitted to assassinations. She admitted to resistance work. But she never gave up a single name. Not Freddy. Not Truus. Not anyone. She protected her friends to the end. April 17, 1945. 18 days before the Netherlands would be liberated. Everyone knew the war was over. Even the Nazis. There was an agreement to stop executions. But one man ignored it. A Nazi officer named Willy Lages wanted Hannie Schaft dead. 2 Dutch collaborators were assigned as executioners. They took Hannie to the sand dunes of Overveen, a place already soaked with blood. Hundreds of resistance fighters had been executed and buried there. One executioner raised his pistol and fired. The bullet grazed Hannie's head. She was wounded, but alive. She looked at him and said calmly, "I shoot better than you." The second executioner raised his weapon and fired. Hannie Schaft died in the sand dunes. She was 24 years old. They buried her in a shallow grave. So shallow that her red hair was still visible above the sand. The Netherlands was liberated on May 5, 1945. 18 days after Hannie's death. After the war, 422 bodies were found in the Overveen dunes. 421 men. And 1 woman. Hannie Schaft. She was given a state funeral. Queen Wilhelmina called her a symbol of the resistance. But Freddy and Truus received nothing. For decades, they were ignored. Why? Because they were communists. During the Cold War, anyone connected to communism was treated with suspicion. The sisters who had risked their lives to save their country were pushed aside. Truus found comfort in art. She became a sculptor and created memorials for the resistance. She spoke publicly about the war. Freddy chose a quieter life. She married. She had children. She tried to be normal. But the past never left her. She suffered from nightmares and insomnia. Every year on Remembrance Day, she woke with fear. When people asked how many people she had killed, she always answered the same way. One should not ask a soldier such questions. After liberation, the streets of the Netherlands filled with celebration. Flags returned to windows. People hugged strangers. Church bells rang. The war was over. But for Freddy Oversteegen and her sister Truus, the fighting did not end on May 5, 1945. The guns went silent, but the memories did not. They had survived something very few people could understand. They had lived double lives. They had killed in silence. They had watched death from only a few steps away. And now, they were expected to return to normal. The Dutch government honored many resistance fighters after the war. Medals were given. Ceremonies were held. Names were written into history books. But Freddy and Truus were not invited. For years, no one called. No one thanked them. No one asked what they had done. The reason was political. They were communists. During the Cold War, communism became an enemy in the eyes of Western governments. Anyone connected to it was treated with suspicion. It did not matter that Freddy and Truus had fought Nazis. It did not matter that they had saved lives. They were quietly pushed aside. Forgotten. Truus handled the silence by turning to art. She became a sculptor. Her hands, once trained to hold weapons, now shaped stone and metal. She created memorials to the resistance. Faces carved in grief. Bodies frozen in courage. Art became her way of remembering. She also spoke publicly. She gave interviews. She wrote about what she had seen and done. She believed that silence helped no one. Freddy chose a different path. I coped by getting married and having babies, she later said. She married a man named Jan Dekker. She had 3 children. She tried to build a quiet, ordinary life. But war does not leave people easily. Freddy suffered from nightmares. She could not sleep. Sounds would pull her back into the past without warning. Every year on May 4th, Remembrance Day in the Netherlands, she woke up with dread. While others stood silently to honor the dead, she relived moments she wished she could forget. She carried the weight alone. People often asked the same question. How many people did you kill? Freddy always gave the same answer. One should not ask a soldier such things. Some numbers are not meant to be spoken. Some memories are meant to be carried, not shared. For decades, Freddy visited one grave again and again. The grave of Hannie Schaft. She brought red roses. She stood in silence. She remembered the friend who did not survive. Hannie had become a national symbol. Freddy and Truus remained in the shadows. That silence lasted almost 70 years. In 2014, something finally changed. The Dutch Prime Minister invited Freddy and Truus to an official ceremony. For the first time, the country publicly recognized what they had done. They were awarded the Mobilization War Cross, a military honor for service during World War II. Freddy was 89 years old. Truus was 91. Freddy's son later said it was the happiest day of his mother's life. After 69 years, someone finally said the words they had never heard. Thank you. Streets in Haarlem were named after them. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Their story was finally told. But recognition came late. Very late. Truus Oversteegen died on June 18, 2016. She was 92 years old. Freddy Oversteegen died on September 5, 2018, one day before her 93rd birthday. They left this world quietly, the same way they had fought. Without attention. Without drama. But their legacy did not disappear with them. Throughout her life, Freddy was asked one final question. What advice would you give future generations? Her answer echoed the words her mother had spoken decades earlier. When you have to make a decision, it must be the right one. And you must always remain human. Those words defined their lives. Freddy and Truus killed people. They shot men in forests. On street corners. Behind closed doors. They watched life leave the eyes of their enemies. But they cried after every kill. They refused to murder children. They carried guilt, not pride. They remained human. The Nazis did not. They killed millions systematically, without remorse, without doubt, without humanity. That is the difference. During World War II, about 90% of the Dutch population tried to live normal lives under occupation. 5% collaborated. 5% joined the resistance. Of that 5%, only a small number were women. And even fewer killed with their own hands. Freddy Oversteegen was one of them. Freddy Oversteegen never saw herself as a hero. She did not like the word. Heroes were people from movies, she said. People with music behind them. People without nightmares. She was just a girl who made a choice. During World War II, the Netherlands was a country under pressure. 90% of the population tried to survive quietly under Nazi rule. They followed orders. They kept their heads down. They hoped the war would pass. 5% chose collaboration. They worked with the occupiers. They pointed fingers. They betrayed neighbors. And 5% chose resistance. Only a small number of those fighters were women. And only a handful killed with their own hands. Freddy Oversteegen was one of them. She was 14 years old when she joined the resistance. A teenager with braided pigtails and a pistol hidden in her bicycle basket. She did not look like a soldier. She did not feel like a soldier. But history does not ask what you look like. It asks what you do. Freddy, her sister Truus, and their friend Hannie Schaft are believed to have killed dozens of Nazis and Dutch collaborators. Some estimates say the number may have been over 100. Freddy never confirmed it. She never denied it. She never apologized either. She did not kill out of hatred. She killed out of necessity. There is a difference. They lived in a world where laws had collapsed. There were no courts to protect the innocent. No police to stop injustice. No safety for children. Only choices. Terrible choices. And consequences that lasted a lifetime. Freddy often said that killing never became easy. Not the first time. Not the last time. After every mission, she cried. She remembered faces. She remembered eyes. She remembered the instinct to help someone even after pulling the trigger. That instinct, she said, was proof she was still human. The sisters drew a line they would never cross. They refused to kill children. Even when ordered. Even when threatened. That line mattered. It was the difference between resistance and terrorism. Between fighting evil and becoming it. Their mother had warned them. Always stay human. They carried those words into every mission. The Nazis believed strength meant domination. Obedience. Fear. Freddy and Truus believed strength meant responsibility. They understood that violence changes you. That it leaves scars no one else can see. They accepted those scars so others would not have to. After the war, the world moved on. People rebuilt cities. Families tried to forget. History simplified the story. But Freddy lived with the past every day. She woke at night. She remembered footsteps. She remembered gunshots. She never claimed pride. She never claimed innocence. She only claimed responsibility. For many years, the country she helped save did not want to hear her story. Politics replaced gratitude. Silence replaced recognition. But time has a way of correcting itself. Slowly, painfully, truth returns. When Freddy finally stood at the ceremony in 2014, receiving her medal, she did not smile for long. She thought of Hannie. Of Truus. Of those who never came home. The honor was not a celebration. It was an acknowledgement. That mattered. Freddy Oversteegen lived to be 92 years old. She died quietly, without headlines, without drama. But her life left a question behind. What would you do? If you were 14. If the law was gone. If innocent people were about to die, would you look away? Or would you act? Freddy did not believe everyone should make the same choice she did. She only believed that choices matter. That refusing to choose is also a choice. She once said something simple. When you have to decide, it must be the right decision. And you must always remain human. That sentence carries more weight than any weapon she ever held. Freddy Oversteegen was not a legend from a movie. There was no slow motion. No dramatic ending. No applause. Just a girl on a bicycle. A pistol hidden from view. A heart that carried fear, doubt, and courage at the same time. She did not fight because she loved killing. She fought because she loved life. And that is why her story matters. Not because of how many Nazis she killed. But because, in a world that had lost its humanity, she refused to lose hers.